I thought that it would be helpful to you folks in handling the second cartoon assignment if I tried to give you an example of how you might approach a cartoon. So I've chosen a cartoon, and you're looking at it here, and it's a cartoon from May of 1965. Now, what I thought I'd do was put the cartoon on the left and then put the words from the guidelines document that you have up there under the under the assignments tab, under the cartoon assignment number 2, to review some of the words of that document. So I say in that document, students' preparation will have included a thorough review of each cartoon evaluated. They will have looked for the many clues that will help with an accurate evaluation of the cartoon, to include but not be limited to the date of the cartoon's caption, all images, and the cartoonist incorporated into the cartoon, and any labels affixed to the images. Okay, and I went on to say at the end there that you will consult your text or any other acceptable electronic resources, and that if you do use electronic resources, that you will cite them in your form. And also, these do not include Wikipedia and nearly all .com sites, and by that I mean you can use the New York Times or the BBC or NPR or something like that. But other than that, I really don't want you using .com sites at all. So let's take a look at this cartoon on the basis of those things that I highlighted. The date of the cartoon, really important, and the caption of the little box that I included here shows that the cartoon was created on the 4th of May of 1965. So we know that this is a 1965 cartoon, and it relates to the unit associated with the 1960s in our week by week, unit by unit. This is chapter 25. So that's the first thing we know. Now we look at some of the other clues. There is a caption, and it says "up escalators," and that's about as big a caption as you're going to get out of this. Sometimes it blazes across the top or at the bottom, but in this case, it's just hooked to the side of these escalators, both of which are going up. And then if we look at the two escalators, one is labeled Dominican Republic and the other is labeled Vietnam. And again, we're looking at the date 1965. There is another image here, and it's the image of a gentleman, and he's sort of front and center here. And it's easy for me, having been born 16 years before this cartoon was created, to know who this gentleman was. Some of you may be familiar because you have a pretty good idea of famous Americans. Um, but looking at this, I went into the chapter 25, and I didn't see an image of this gentleman, so that wouldn't be of much help to you. But you might want to think about the date and the clues. This is the most powerful man in the world in 1965. The U.S. president is still arguably the most powerful person in the world. But in 1965, it certainly was. And it's Lyndon Baines Johnson. Pretty good hunch that that's who this is because he is front and center in this image. But you certainly could search his image out by looking at other key Americans in the period, and I think you'd find him front and center. We know it's Johnson because he was a big man, a tall man with sort of big ears, and his hair was sort of combed back. And he was the president who came in after Kennedy's assassination. So we have all of those things now together. President Johnson, the Dominican Republic, Vietnam, up escalators, and it takes a little bit of thinking, but both of these are moving upward. And another term related to escalators is escalation, meaning involvement, increased involvement. We'd already been in Vietnam with military advisors. Now we were moving upward to increased involvement. If we look over at Dominican Republic and you go into your textbook, because Vietnam is in there, but in the index, Dominican Republic is there also. And I found at the bottom of page 938 over to 939 a discussion of why the Dominican Republic was of concern at this time. Remember, this is really before the United States has gone full blown into Vietnam. It's before the upcoming Gulf of Tonkin resolution that is going to be coming and getting us firmly in to Vietnam. But the Dominican Republic is also concerned because there had been a coup in the Dominican Republic. It had established a reformer. The reformer was not a communist, but he had progressive leanings that were always suspect to the United States. Remember, this is the highlight of the Cuban crisis as well, the 60s is a time when there's lots of not the highlight occurred back in 62, but the Cuba is still very much an issue, the fear of communism moving into that area of the world. So in both cases, we see a president who's sort of questioning what he does, but he seems to be moving in a direction of escalating American involvement in Vietnam and in the Dominican Republic. So that kind of shows you how I looked at this cartoon and how I would recommend you look at the cartoon. Remember, the date of the cartoon is vital, and at that point, you have to pull out your textbook and start looking around what's going on at this time. Hints you can get from the caption. There isn't one, although up escalators is probably the closest to the caption here. And we do see the escalators labeled Vietnam and the Dominican Republic. And then we see Lyndon Baines Johnson. We this is where you would start as you tied this all together. If you use outside resources, as I say, don't hesitate to. You might even search this out and find this cartoon, and it might be all described. That's fine. Just please put your resources down. Okay, so hopefully this is a help. Good, thank you.